Before filmmakers came up with the idea of editing and storytelling in their films, they used to just film day-to-day life, things like trains moving out of a station and people leaving work. The first people to do this were the Lumiere brothers in 1895. Though it's not really the kind of stuff we'd find interesting nowadays, back then, when the invention of film had just come about, people found it mesmerizing to watch these essentially moving photographs. This didn't really last long though. Even though these films were a great documentation of this time, people didn't see the point in paying to go see something they could just go outside and watch with their own eyes. The first person to really use narrative storytelling in their films was French illusionist Georges Méliès. Méliès came up with some of the earliest special effects in films, such as the ones used in his 1902 film, Voyage dans la Lune. He also developed editing techniques like in-camera editing, where the camera operator would shoot the desired amount of film for a scene, move the camera to a different position, or just move something in the scene. At this point, a man called Edwin S. Porter started off his career as a film projectionist. He later came to work for Thomas Edison, the inventor of the kinetograph, one of the early devices used to view films. Edison made Porter one of his top directors and cameramen. In 1903, Porter made the highly acclaimed film The Great Train Robbery. With this film, Porter created one of the first editing techniques, cross-cutting, otherwise known as parallel editing. Using editing techniques like this to create fictional narratives in film caught on with other filmmakers and inspired them to experiment with Porter's techniques. One man in particular was D.W. Griffith, after briefly working for Edwin S. Porter as an actor in one of his films. Inspired by Porter, he decided to make his own films. Griffith experimented with lots of different angles and shot types, which was a new concept for filmmakers, and it meant more emotion could be given through shots. He also brought about continuity editing, a way of making a narrative look smooth and feel coherent with all the other shots. Doing this, he brought about many of the shot types filmmakers use today, and his techniques inspired many future filmmakers. Around 1919, in Russia, Lev Kuleshov, who was one of the founders of the Moscow Film School, which was one of the first film schools in history, experimented with the idea of giving meaning to sequences of shots through connections. His experiment consisted of a shot of a man with a blank expression, cutting to a bowl of soup, then back to the man, then to a girl in a coffin, then back to the man, then to a woman lying in a chair, and then back to the man again. The audience reaction was that how hungrily the man looked at the soup, and how sad the man looked at the girl in the coffin, and how lovingly the man looked at the woman, even though the man's expression never changed. Sergei Eisenstein, a Russian filmmaker responsible for the idea of montage editing, which consisted of a selection of shots edited together to give them more meaning and emotion. One of Eisenstein's most influential films was Battleship Potemkin. Released in Russia in 1925, Battleship Potemkin was a huge success due to its use of montage and the famous Odessa Stairs scene. The French New Wave, or La Nouvelle Vague, was a group of French film critics in 1958 who wanted to break the current rules of Hollywood films of this time and experimented with fresh new editing techniques. An example of one of these would be Jean-Luc Godard's A Bout de Soufflé. These films became popular for their new approach to film editing and visual style. The intention of these films were to make the viewer feel like they were watching a movie, something a bit more abstract and not just a boring film, and subsequently changed the way filmmakers thought about editing films. So how did they edit early films together? Well, before there was digital video, or even editing devices like the Moviola, which I'll get to in a minute, filmmakers used to just edit films by cutting reels of celluloid film with scissors and placing parts back together with cement or glue. The next innovation in editing technology is the Moviola. Invented by Arwen Sororia in 1928, the Moviola is a machine that enabled the editor to view each shot while editing. This was regulated with foot pedals, which made it a lot easier compared to magnifying glasses, which they used before its invention. Another device used to cut films was the flatbed. It worked in a very similar way to the Moviola, except it was table-based. It also had a way of viewing shots while editing. Moving on to video, which was a huge technical advancement because it started off the era of nonlinear editing. Before I explain what nonlinear editing is, I'll first explain what linear editing is. Till the 1990s, linear editing was just called video editing, until nonlinear editing came about. But linear editing really only applies when filmmakers use film stock to make their films, and it meant they could only cut straight lines of film. And once the editor had cut the film, that's how it would look in the film. And all that would make the process of creating a scene take a very long time, and complex scenes even longer. So when video and digital editing came along, that meant editors could cut films using nonlinear editing, which meant they could easily move footage around on a timeline without having to move lots of film reels around by hand. We can manipulate time to make flashbacks flash forwards, speed and slow down to make believable distances between actors and assets in the film. For example, the 180-degree rule, which means the camera's filming characters should stay within a 180-degree semicircle around them. And finally, rhythm, making the film feel like it flows with the rest of the film coherently.